Welcome to True Crime Story, where real cases reveal terrifying truths. Today, we uncover the chilling plot against TV host Holly Willoughby, a man obsessed, a dark online chat room, and a detailed plan to abduct and harm. Just days before he could act, an undercover cop intervened. This isn't fiction, it's real. Stay with us for the full story. Gavin Plum, a 36-year-old security guard from Harlow, Essex, was a father of two. To the outside world, he seemed ordinary. But behind a computer screen, he was leading a very different life, one filled with obsession, darkness, and violence. In October 2023, police arrested Plum for plotting to kidnap, assault, and murder Holly Willoughby. The case would go on to horrify the nation. What saved her wasn't CCTV, or bodyguards, or chance. It was a stranger thousands of miles away, pretending to be someone else. And that stranger was an undercover cop. This is the story of a digital obsession that grew into a real-world threat, a plan that took shape in the darkest corners of the internet, and the international operation that stopped it just in time. Holly Willoughby was more than just a television presenter. She was a familiar face in homes across the UK, bright, warm, and full of energy. She co-hosted daytime TV, appeared in family-friendly shows, and had a reputation for being kind, professional, and loved by viewers of all ages. Off-screen, she was a mother, a wife, and someone who kept her personal life away from the spotlight as much as she could. She had no known enemies, no public controversies, no warning signs that someone might be watching her so closely, someone who would take such a dangerous interest in her life. That person was Gavin Plum. At first glance, he was nothing out of the ordinary. He lived in Harlow, Essex, and worked as a security guard at a shopping center. He was overweight, lived a fairly isolated life, and described himself online as a single father of two. But behind the quiet front, Gavin was spiraling deeper into a world of violent online fantasies. He spent countless hours in a chat group on an app called Kik. The group was called Abduct Lovers, and it wasn't a small, hidden corner. It had over 100 members from around the world discussing fantasies about kidnap, sexual assault, and murder. It was in this group that Gavin began talking with someone he thought shared his dark desires. That person, he believed, was a man in the United States, someone who understood him, someone who might help turn his fantasies into reality. The chats grew more specific, more personal. Gavin didn't just talk about general fantasies. He spoke about a real woman, a real plan. He told the man that Holly Willoughby didn't have CCTV at her home, that he knew her schedule, what time she woke up, when she was alone, when she had no security. He even mentioned her husband by name. He shared details about where he would park the car, what they would bring with them. He even suggested choosing which of her outfits they liked and wanted to take. All of this, he said, was carefully prepared. He had been collecting tools for 18 months. Ropes, knives, cable ties, BDSM restraints, and chloroform. He filmed himself showing these items, like a twisted shopping haul. He sent the videos over to his online friend with a calm voice, almost like he was preparing for a camping trip. But that friend wasn't who he thought he was. Unknown to Gavin, the person he was sharing every horrific detail with was an undercover law enforcement officer in Minnesota. And soon, this quiet online friendship would explode into a full-blown international investigation. It started like many online exchanges do, small messages, shared interests, and a bond that slowly grew. But this wasn't a conversation about hobbies or everyday life. Gavin Plum and the undercover officer, who Gavin thought was a willing accomplice, were talking about how to abduct, assault, and murder Holly Willoughby. Over the course of 300 private messages, Gavin laid out everything, step by step. He talked about using chloroform on Holly and her husband, tying them up, choosing her clothes, and disappearing with her in the night. He talked about what would happen after they were done with her, and how he would slit her throat and get rid of the body. The level of detail was horrifying, but it was also evidence, and the officer knew it. While Gavin was still planning, still fantasizing, the officer alerted authorities in the UK. On October 4th, 2023, Essex police made their move. They raided Gavin's home in Harlow and arrested him on the spot. Inside, they found everything he had described: ropes, knives, cable ties, BDSM gear, a bottle labeled as chloroform, and something else. On Gavin's computer, police found thousands of images of Holly Willoughby. These weren't just pictures from her shows or social media. They included deepfake pornography, manipulated images that placed her face onto explicit photos and videos. It was clear that this obsession had been going on for a long time. Police traced the chats, the videos, and the digital files. Everything matched. Everything he said in his messages, he had actually prepared. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered this wasn't Gavin's first brush with violence. In 2006, he had approached a woman on a train and told her he had a gun, ordering her to get off with him at the next stop. 2 years later, in 2008, he threatened 2 teenage girls with a box cutter and tried to tie their hand behind their backs. Both incidents had led to convictions. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't just making a move on impulse. He was building something over months, maybe even years. A plan, a weapon, a mission. As the evidence piled up, prosecutors prepared for what would become one of the most shocking criminal trials in recent UK history. Not because of what happened, but because of what nearly did. The turning point in this case came when the messages crossed a clear legal line. Gavin wasn't just fantasizing anymore. He was asking for help. He was organizing logistics. He had set a date in his mind. And most importantly, he had taken physical steps toward making it real. The undercover officer, recognizing the urgency, sent all the information directly to UK law enforcement. Essex police and counterterrorism officers moved quickly. The coordination between US and UK authorities was smooth and focused. There was no room for delay. They had to move before Gavin acted on his plan. On the morning of October 4th, 2023, officers arrived at his flat. Gavin was home. The arrest was swift. Inside his small, cluttered apartment, officers found the kit, the tools he had spoken about so openly in voice notes. Knives, metal cable ties, restraints, a bottle of liquid he claimed was chloroform, the exact gear he had described while planning Holly Willoughby's abduction. It wasn't just the physical evidence. Investigators uncovered hours of disturbing video footage. Gavin had recorded himself discussing the plan. Calmly, casually, sometimes even smiling. His voice never showed panic. Just quiet, calculated confidence. One clip stood out. In it, Gavin walks through the steps of the kidnapping. What time to go? How to sneak in? How long it would take? He even estimated how far the getaway car needed to be parked. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was a real plan with real tools and a real target. Detectives also searched Gavin's hard drive. That's where they found the deepfake images, hundreds of them, if not thousands. Holly Willoughby's face had been digitally placed onto explicit photos and adult content. The images were detailed and obsessive, sorted into folders. Some had been saved more than a year before his arrest. For investigators, it painted a clear picture. Gavin Plum had been building toward this moment for a long time. During questioning, Gavin gave conflicting answers. At times, he claimed it was all just a fantasy, a joke. But the tone of his messages, the physical evidence, and his past made that excuse hard to believe. In June 2024, the case went to trial. The prosecution presented the chats, the videos, the voice notes, and the forensic evidence. Gavin's history was also brought into focus. The prior convictions for attempted kidnappings in 2006 and 2008. It showed a pattern. A man who had fantasized before and acted on those fantasies. The defense argued mental health issues and suggested he had no real intention of carrying it out. But the jury didn't accept that. The evidence was too strong, too detailed, too real. On July 12, 2024, Gavin Plum was found guilty on all counts: soliciting murder, encouraging or assisting kidnapping, and encouraging or assisting rape. The judge handed him a life sentence with a minimum of 16 years behind bars. It was a sentence that reflected the seriousness of the threat and how close he had come to destroying a life. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. Holly Willoughby wasn't present, But the impact of what had nearly happened to her was felt by everyone. A woman who had spent her life in front of the camera, spreading joy and light to viewers, had unknowingly become the target of a deeply disturbed man's darkest fantasies. Gavin Plum showed little emotion as he was sentenced. The judge didn't hold back. He described the case as one of the most disturbing examples of obsession turning into a real-world threat, and made it clear that Gavin would serve a long time behind bars, at least 16 years before even being considered for release. For Holly and her family, the relief was mixed with fear. The idea that someone had been watching them, tracking their movements, planning their capture, it shook them to the core. Security around her home was increased. Her public appearances were reduced. And even now, long after the arrest, the scars of fear still remain. The public was shocked, not just by Gavin's actions, but by the world in which they began. A chat room with over 100 members, openly discussing fantasies of kidnap, assault, and murder. The internet had become a hiding place for violent thoughts, and in some cases, a breeding ground for real danger. Questions were raised. How many other forums like Abduct Lovers exist? How many people in those groups are simply talking? And how many are planning? Are enough resources being put toward tracking these groups? And how many more people could be at risk? This case forced a harsh spotlight on digital platforms, on the tools we use every day, and on how thin the line is between online fantasy and real-world violence. It also highlighted the importance of international cooperation. Without the undercover officer in Minnesota, Holly might never have known the danger she was in until it was too late. A life may have been saved because one person took a threat seriously and acted fast. But even with Gavin behind bars, the unease remains. Because this wasn't just one man's crime. It was a window into a much darker problem, one that hides in the shadows of the internet, and one that could surface again at any time. To the viewers, what are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe justice was truly served? Have we done enough to monitor these dangerous corners of the web? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, real cases, real danger, and the people who stop them, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video. Stay safe, stay aware, and thank you for watching.